Hello, here we are. In this video, we are going to wrap up our unit on thinking, intelligence, and language. This is going to be part that covers language, the last part of this series. So, what are we going to do? Let me pull it up. We'll start by just talking about what is language. Language is our spoken, written, or gestured work. Gestured meaning like sign language. It's the way we communicate meaning to ourselves and to others. So that's what language is. Here's an interesting paragraph. Pause the video and read this. Okay, you can unpause. So it's fun to read this because the words are scrambled. You can still read it though because of top-down processing. So once again, that idea that our mind can make sense of the stimuli because our mind can interpret things automatically. So I just thought we'd start with that. What about language? All right. After age 1, we learn about 3,500 words a year. And by the time you graduate from high school, you have about 60,000 words that you know, which is a tremendous amount of learning. How does it happen? It starts with a critical period that kids develop learning. From ages 0 to 7 is when kids develop learning. And if you don't learn a language by then, you might not be able to learn a language after that. So that's the critical period. It has to happen before age 7. You also see this with kids learning foreign languages. Kids learn a second language much easier before age 7 than after age 7. All right, what are the parts of language? There are two types, phonemes and morphemes. A phoneme is the smallest distinctive sound, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like our alphabet. But there are also some sounds that are not in our alphabet, like CH or SH, or like some of the Spanish sounds, like the 2L sounds. So there are some sounds that aren't in our language altogether. I think in our language there's about 40 morphemes or 40 phonemes. There are also morphemes, which is the smallest unit of language that carries meaning. So for instance, in the word unkindness, there are 3 morphemes. In the word cats, there are 2 morphemes. Cat is a morpheme, and the letter S adds meaning to cat. So that letter S is a morpheme when it's added to a word to make it plural. Now, if the letter S is just by itself, it's a phoneme. So that's important. Some phonemes are also morphemes, like the letter I and the letter A. They have meaning by themselves. Okay, when do we learn language? We go through several stages that we learn language in, and the first stage is babbling. So 4 months to a year, babies are babbling, and they're making cute little sounds like agoo, and parents are usually imitating them. And they've done some research on this, and they found that parents who imitate their baby's sounds, the babies learn language faster. If you talk to a baby that's babbling and you use real words, they don't develop language as fast as if you use the same babbling sounds that they're making. Okay, next stage is called the one-word stage. Around age 1, little babies start to speak one word at a time. Usually it's mama, dada, things like that, doggy. And so they'll say doggy, and sometimes they'll point at the dog, or they'll say mama, and they'll reach for mom. So they start to learn that language. The next stage is called the 2-word stage. Between 1 and 2, child starts to speak in 2-word sentences. Sometimes it's called telegraphic speech because, like in the old times before telephones, there were telegraphs, and you would just send. It cost money to send a telegram per letter. So you would just send the minimum amount of words that you could to communicate meaning. So that's how babies are talking too. They'll say like go car which means I want to go in the car. Or they'll go like, eat apple, I want to eat the apple. So that's the telegraphic speech. It's 2 words, but it conveys meaning. And the funny thing is, as a parent, it's pretty easy. You learn very quickly like what your kid means, even though they're only using telegraphic speech. Also, telegraphic speech is usually verbs and nouns. They usually don't get into adjectives and adverbs until later. Okay, then you start getting the longer phrases over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age. Longer phrases and sentences. By the time they're in elementary school, they're using words to have fun. They're playing around with words, using humor. For instance, like this example, you never starve in the desert because of all the sand which is there. So that's kind of where you get to. That's pretty abstract and funny. So those are the 3 stages. It's babbling, 1 word, 2 word. Those are the main stages. Okay, here's a synopsis of when those stages happen. All right, what about the question of how do we get language? Psychologists have some different theories about how it happens. We're learning so many words. Like I said, by the time we're done with high school, 60,000 words. We're going to go back and talk about operant conditioning and B.F. Skinner. I don't know if you remember that guy from the beginning of the year, but he had a theory, which is that kids are getting positive reinforcement when they learn words and when they say new words. And so it's positive reinforcement that is teaching them to use language. Now, that certainly is true some of the time, like when my kids were first using words, like the first time they say dada or mama, me and my wife got real excited, and our excitement would be positive reinforcement for those kids, for our kids. So that's true, there is positive reinforcement. But the problem with Skinner's theory is that you've learned 60,000 words by the time you're done with high school. Are you getting positive reinforcement for all those words and all the different ways you can combine those words into sentences? It doesn't seem like positive reinforcement happens that much when you think about all the way you can combine so many words into sentences. Something else is going on there. So another theory is called the inborn universal grammar theory. And a guy named Noam Chomsky came up with this idea. And he thought that the rate of language acquisition is so fast it cannot be explained through operant conditioning. And he thought that we had this inborn capacity to learn language, that all humans are born with this. And so he called it the universal grammar. We're kind of wired to learn what nouns and pronouns are and parts of speech, and we're kind of wired to learn to put them together. We're wired to babble and go through the 1-word stage and 2-word stage. So Chomsky's idea was that it was inborn, it was innate, it was part of our genetic makeup. So there's one more theory, and before I tell you the last theory, we need to know that language and thinking are critically intertwined, intricately intertwined. Without language, it's hard to think because we think in words. So there's one more theory that is about this, which is called the linguistic determinism, and it's a guy named Benjamin Whorf who came up with this. He suggested that language sometimes determines the way that we think. If you have certain words and concepts at your disposal, you might think about the world in a different way. For instance, he noted this group of people called the Hopi people, which is a Native American group, this was an Indonesian group. They didn't have any words for the past, and so they couldn't think very well about the past. Also in Bozeman, we have a lot of words describing the quality of snow at Bridger Bowl. And we can think about the snow in all kinds of complex ways. If we were talking to our friends about it, how was the snow today? But if you had some people from Florida who came up here to go skiing, they'd never really been in snow before, all they would say was like there was snow or there was ice, and they wouldn't have any other words to describe the conditions of the snow. So they wouldn't be able to think about the quality of snow the way that we can think about it. Hope that makes sense. All All right, that's the end of this presentation. See me in class if you have any questions.